If I was a hack, I'd start this video out by reenacting a scene from Jordan Peele's Us. I'd have a phone here, I'd pick it up, my doppelganger would be on the other end, but I feel that in the case of Jordan Peele's Us, I shouldn't even pay tribute to it. Let's get this review underway, shall we? Alright. I saw Jordan Peele's Us 2 days ago, mostly because there's nothing better on. I've seen a lot of Key and Peele sketches. They're all really good, and for the most part, they're all mediocre. They're kind of funny. They're not as good as, like, I don't know, Eddie Murphy or Garrett Morris or Chris Rock, sure. But Jordan Peele is like, okay. I mean, he's not bad. But then Jordan Peele thought, I'm gonna be the next George A. Romero. And he's like, I'm gonna revolutionize the horror genre. So that's when he came out with his first big schlock blockbuster, Get Out. And I watched that. I mean, I didn't watch it. I don't have to watch something to know what it's about. I'm good at knowing what a movie is about because, I mean, there are only 10 per year, what with how Hollywood is so restrictive and whatnot, so how could I not know what Get Out was about? So I thought, maybe Jordan Peele's learned his lesson this time around with Us. The trailer looked kind of neat, like it looked like an interesting, fun kind of story, like there's this family of 4, and then there's this creepy family of 4, and they break into the house. The trailer looks real kind of interesting. So then I watched the movie, and the first thing that I had to notice is that Jordan Peele's analogies are they're always not subtle enough, and they're always way too extreme. With Get Out, it's about white people wanting to pretend to be black people. So instead of a cheap option such as blackface, they literally take their minds and put them into black people's bodies. And of course, this is Jordan Peele Fantasyland, so no one ever wonders what happened to the black people's bodies, or and it also just kind of insinuates that black people's minds work differently than white people's minds, which I think is pretty racist. I think that Jordan Peele definitely is a racist, and whether he's a commonplace racist or a reverse racist, I couldn't say, but for sure Get Out just isn't that clever or deep. It's not good. It's like the Stepford Wives, but with racism instead of sexism, and overall it's just not that good. So I thought, with Us, it looks like he's just going to kind of a non-preachy, not political type, just kind of horror, fest with these creepy, like, just this creepy parallel family, right? So it's not that.
Have no fear, O'Reilly's here.
The sewer scissor people are essentially black people, and then the sewer where they live is the ghetto, and then the upper world is like the privileged world. It's a statement on segregation and classism. Jordan Peele can say that that's not what it's about, but really the analogy is so thin, everyone knows what it's about. And whether you see it as just, shameless, just not even smart type horror, or whether you see it as the greatest thing ever made, depends on whether you're a good reviewer or a bad reviewer. I just see it as kind of lazy writing, and he's just putting a political thing in there that doesn't take that much thought. Just don't be a racist, but I go to the movies for escapist fantasy, which is why when I go to a horror movie, I don't root for the villains, and I don't feel any sympathy for them. I mean, the thing is, Jordan Peele kind of defeats the purpose of portraying the fact that lots of black people live in ghettos and gentrification and whatnot by having the main characters be for, middle class, very well-to-do black people who haven't dealt with the issue of segregation, obviously. And I mean, I guess that's so that obviously they're above the sewer scissor people, but I mean, sure, anyone is more up the class ladder than them. I mean, sure, the main characters aren't as good as the millionaire white family, which is kind of an offensive portrayal of Caucasian races, because, I mean, I wonder what Jordan Peele's interpretation of an Irish immigrant in 1900 would be. You'd probably think they'd be sipping wine and eating caviar. But in reality, not all white people are how Jordan Peele portrays them in the film. I find it kind of offensive. I mean, not that the white people aren't you know, very, very snarky and not as likable characters as the black characters, which I think is kind of nice. It provides an interesting contrast. But then again, as I said, Jordan Peele kind of ruins the segregation narrative by making the main characters have no problems in their lives. But of course, that's because Jordan Peele retreats into fantasy land because he's not willing to make a documentary about real problems. He can just make a cheap horror analogy and be hailed as a genius because Hollywood spreads itself too thin. And these days, a comedian also has to direct horror, even though the two genres are very contradictory and they don't really work out that well together. You know, and Jordan Peele. And meanwhile, great movies, like for instance, I don't know, like there are lots of great independent horror movies that no one ever watches. I mean, not the previous one that I made, obviously. That's just a funny commercial. But there are some nice independent horror movies out there that I'm sure never get watched because Jordan Peele dominates the airwaves, and these days anything in Hollywood is the only thing that's in Hollywood. And once you get in Hollywood, you're stuck there for life. And once you know. But anyway, as for the review, it's kind of absurd. It opens off with so from here on out there are going to be spoilers, but you know, I don't know why you'd care about this unless you really wanted to see this movie, in which case you shouldn't want to see this movie. And I've gotten to the point where if I see the trailer for a movie, I can already tell what's going to happen. That's how good I am at watching movies. Let's take a look at you know, let's take a look at the plot. So it begins with this kind of commercial for Hands Across America 1986, and you think, oh, those seem really outdated, but then it says 1986, which is kind of confusing because, you know, and then I thought, oh, the whole movie is going to be set in 1986. That'll be kind of interesting. But then only the first scene is set in 1986, so it doesn't really need to say that it is in 1986. I guess that's because of Hands Across America, which comes off as a plot device later. But in the opening scene, the main character gets this t-shirt with Michael Jackson's Thriller on. It's like, we get that it's 1986, or maybe it's just that the setting of an amusement park isn't automatically 80s enough, so they have to kind of bludgeon it into our heads. I didn't find that clever. So then, the most cliche part of the movie is the Hall of Mirrors, which is like in every pretty bad horror movie. I mean, it's not like a scary Hall of Mirrors or anything. From what I can tell, there's like a prop of an owl that isn't even scary, so... but nonetheless, it's a very overused trope. I'd suggest Jordan Peele stops using this. See, Jordan Peele's films masquerade as just fun horror, but actually they're all this incredible political social commentary, because everything these days has to be about social justice. So anywho, the main characters are, I mean, they're identifiable as the main family. You know, the opening scene cuts off right when she meets her doppelganger in the mirror and she's about to scream, and then you think, oh, something happens there that Jordan Peele's hiding from us, you know, because it cuts right to the title. And then there are all these rabbits in a cage, and it's kind of confusing until you see the last scene where she goes down to the sewer scissor people lair. But anywho, so again, the white family is acted kind of bad. I mean, I suppose they're supposed to be not very likable characters or whatnot, but I mean, overall, they're just not very charismatic. Overall, I mean, I think the acting's okay. So we start off with them going back to Santa Cruz, and the mom's like, hell no, because I met a freaky doppelganger here when I was a kid. So you think, ooh, this ought to be creepy, right? But then, then the scene from the trailer comes up. I mean, I admired Jordan Peele for like really cutting to the chase. There's just like 2 scenes before we get to the cabin, and then the family starts seeing these freaky doppelgangers, and it's like they're out on the driveway. That's really well shot. The dad is going out there like, get off my property. That's pretty funny. And then, it's like some legit tension when they find out, oh, we left the key on the door, and, they break in, and then, like, the mom splits, the evil mom splits the family up, so they go in different directions, each with their counterpart, and they go, and then they all end up escaping on the boat and going to the white people's house where the white people have been murdered, and then they end up navigating their way through a post-apocalyptic hellscape. The mom finds out what the scissor sewer people are up to, then there's a kind of twist, and then it's done. So, by the books, it looks like a pretty standard horror movie, except it's actually an allegory for racism, and, discrimination, classism, whatnot. So, the backstory, essentially, is, of these sewer scissor people is, see, I thought this would be like The Strangers, but like a better version of The Strangers, mostly because it looked like it would be better acted. Plus, the idea of the killers are doppelgangers is pretty creepy, because, like, it's them. But halfway through, this movie shifts from being like an isolated horror movie where they're in a cabin in the woods with no means of communication to being more of a post-apocalyptic sci-fi, which really ruins it. I don't know if I've said this before, but no matter what horror directors will think, it's not as scary if something happens to the entire human race as if it happens to just one person. Because the feeling of isolation in horror movies is what really makes it scary. The feeling that you're alone in your experiences, and no one will probably believe you. But then it turns out that the entire world is being taken over by the red-clad scissor sewer people, and they're here to stay, baby. And imagine if Psycho had like a bunch of Bates motels all run by Norman Bates, and he stabs, all the Norman Bates stab like 2,000 ladies in the shower. That wouldn't be as scary. What's scary about the Bates Motel is that it's isolated. There's only one Norman Bates, and there's only one lady in the shower. And also, it's pretty scary also because Norman Bates is just a psychopath, and we're not supposed to empathize with him as we are with the sewer scissor people. And plus, he's not a two-dimensional character. He's just like crazy, and he kills people. And that's what horror used to be. It didn't used to be politics, but these days there are so few movies put out that every movie has to try to be as much Oscar bait as it possibly can. So Jordan Peele really has to pull out all the stops here with his message of acceptance for the scissor sewer people. Horror movies aren't just about evil dolls or, guys in masks anymore. Now, you're supposed to feel sorry for the sewer scissor people who want to kill off all their surface world counterparts, because if you don't, they're just like you. They're Americans also. How heartless of you to not notice that they exist in a subterranean world connected to a hall of mirrors. You selfish racist. Don't be classist like that. You've got to empathize with them. And I think that's kind of where Us really slips up, because I never felt that much sympathy for these psychopaths with the scissors. So at the end, it's revealed that all the red people were invented by these plot device mad scientists that are never mentioned again, mostly because Jordan Peele is a lazy screenwriter and isn't willing to say who invented the clones or why, But then as the evil mom explains, they went away, and then because they were trying to take over the world, but they were like, oh, these clones are like obviously they're all messed up and they won't do what we want, and so they just left, right? And then so from that point on, all the clones were just abandoned in the subterranean world, knocking into walls, because they have to do whatever the people above are doing. And it's pretty freaky, but it doesn't make sense. Like, for instance, what do the people eat? What do the people eat for like over 50 years while they're down here unattended, because the mad scientist left, remember? There's no one watching them. They're not doing anything except just being clones. They're just repeating the movements of the people above. I assume they eat the rabbit meat, but what do the rabbits eat? Do they just eat grass pelts? I mean, I assume the mad scientist didn't include enough grass pelts to last 80 years because they didn't care whether the clones lived or died, since they were a failure. And you might say I'm just nitpicking the thing, but when creating a compelling sci-fi world, you've really got to consider how that sci-fi world works. And here Jordan Peele goes for just cool ideas over things that actually make sense. So, like, I assume that every time someone in the above world takes a bite of a ham sandwich or a hot dog, what the clones are doing is they're biting into a live rabbit. But the trouble is, rabbit meat doesn't contain all the nutrients required for human life, and they're drinking unfiltered sewer water, I assume. So it's like, and as the see, when they first surround the cabin, they're creepy because you think they have like supernatural powers, like they're ghosts or demons or something. That's really genuinely, creepy. And you think, oh wow, these clones can beat the real ones because, like, they have some kind of magic on their side, right? So with that, I thought, but then it turns out that they're not actually ghosts or demons. They're just normal people, but cloned, kind of like Edward Scissorhands. They're just people. But they've lived in the sewers for 80 years, and they've survived on nothing but rabbit meat and unfiltered water. And the question I have is, how can you live on nothing but that? And furthermore, when she goes down into crazy clone land, there's overhead lighting. Like, everywhere is lit up by total illumination, like these overhead lights. And it's like no one notices where the electricity has come from, or that it's being wasted on an abandoned subterranean maze. The movie tries to feign legitimacy by opening with a statistic about there being tons of sewer space in America, but what the statistic fails to mention is that it's not designed for human habitation, which is why a bunch of clones couldn't live down there for 80 years, or however much time. Because sewers aren't designed for that. They're designed to carry urine and feces and biological waste, and they're just not a nice place to live. So the question really is, if they don't have any food, how do they survive? And furthermore, how are they able to break their doppelganger's kneecaps or bite up their face, or even really be a threat? They should be sick or on the verge of dying. Furthermore, the flashback scenes are set in 1986, and as the evil mom explains later on, they survived down there for generations. So what are we talking here? I mean, the first cloned sheep wasn't made until 2001. I mean, they didn't even know DNA was a thing before the 50s, and Crick and Watson. So these must have been the most advanced mad scientists ever. But again, it doesn't go into detail on how they did such a thing. And at the end, all the red people come up above land and they form a giant Hands Across America, which leads me to wonder, what did they do during the actual Hands Across America in 1986? I mean, they'd have to repeat what their counterparts above were doing, so I assume they just bumped into the walls and whatnot. Furthermore, it's explained that the main protagonist wandering into the House of Mirrors as a kid is what kind of set off the whole chain of events, because as she went down into the Hall of Mirrors and got separated from her parents, her clone version went up the escalator and into the Hall of Mirrors and got separated from her parents. So my question is, has no one gone into this Hall of Mirrors before? And if so, I mean, if they did, would their doppelgangers also come up, and would they have the chance to spark a revolution? Because, I mean, the Hall of Mirrors obviously isn't abandoned or anything. It's fully powered by electricity. I mean, it still works. It's still a part of the amusement park, as far as I can tell. But the thing is, as for with the logistics of the thing, it just really makes no sense, and I don't understand it. And, I mean, think about it. These people are armed with scissors. They're just armed with scissors, and yet they're able to combat like humans with guns. You have scissors. And sure, they're able to break into the main family's home because they left their keys outside on the front porch, which is kind of a hack script move. But otherwise, you can just lock the door against them. And in one scene, it's shown that their scissors can break through glass. It's like, wood or metal, you stab a scissor into that, it doesn't break it. So just stay in your house, or I don't know, use a weapon that's more powerful than scissors, which humans have, or surface people have. Now here's what the twist is. At the end, it's revealed that when she met her clone, the clone dragged her down and pretended to be her, and so she's not actually from the surface world, she's from the below world, and the clone, all along, is actually the one who is dragged down from the surface world. Well, this isn't really a twist because, for one, the evil mom is the only one who's ever seen, speaking, so that's kind of, because the other ones just make, animal noises, so that's kind of oh, she knows some English from the surface world. Also, as I mentioned before, it cuts right to the credits at the beginning when they see each other, so there's one of two options. Either they both run away, or the clone does some creepy kind of clone thing, like dragging her down and pretending to be her. But even then, it doesn't change the plot. That's still her husband, those are still her kids. I mean, I wasn't really surprised by that. And also, when the clone is rattling off all this exposition down in the basement, she doesn't even mention that she's the real one, and that the one we thought was the surface one all the time is actually the clone one. I think that's kind of something you'd want to put in your explanation, because it's kind of important. Furthermore, I don't know, because it explains that until she came down there, all the clones were passive and they were just bumping into each other and stuff, and they didn't have the scissors yet. So it's like, why can't she just walk up the escalators again, find her parents, and say, I'm your real daughter, she's a clone. And the parents couldn't deny it, because they'd have, two clone daughters, and they'd be like, oh, show us this giant subterranean city that no one's noticed for some reason. Again, just very lazy script writing on the part of Jordan Peele. Again, and then, some parts are funny, like when the rap song plays and the stupid Alexa, that's kind of funny, but I thought I was watching a horror movie, not a comedy, so why is it trying to be funny? Also, there's this really bad joke at this one point. They're debating how to kill the clones, and the dad says, we ought to make traps like in Home Alone, and the mom says, you're not going to strew any micro machines on the floor. And one of the kids says, what's micro machines? And that's kind of expected because they're just a thing with the 80s. And then the other kid says, what's Home Alone? And, I can understand not knowing what micro machines are. You just don't know, not know what Home Alone is after 8 years of being on this earth. It's a great movie. It's better than Jordan Peele's Us at any rate. But just that joke was bad, and Jordan Peele should keep that for future reference. But anywho, and then also, these people can't even talk. Like, they can't talk, they have no hand-eye coordination. I think we're supposed to feel sympathy for them. I don't feel sympathy for them because they just want to take over the entire world even though they can't pick up a cup of coffee, and then they want to kill all their counterparts on the surface world, and it's like, no, I don't feel sorry for these scissor killers. They could just say, we've been mistreated in this lab experiment, we want citizenship. Or like they could say, they could go to the mad scientists who created them or try to find the descendants of the mad scientists who created them. It's not the fault of just the normal surface people because they never knew that the clones existed. Again, Jordan Peele is kind of indirectly, unintentionally, I think, pointing out there how a lot of victims of racism just point at all white people instead of just the white people who have been racist. So that's kind of an unintentional analogy that I don't think Jordan Peele would be clever enough to pull off. But again, I don't feel sympathy for these scissor people. I just feel like they couldn't create a giant zombie horde. And I think that's where the movie starts to lose its sense of reality, because this giant crowd of like people who've grown up in the sewer eating nothing but rabbit meat and unfiltered water, with scissors, they're not going to be able to kill everyone. And the news treats it like it's like the zombie pandemic 2000. It's like, they're not even zombies, they just want to kill everyone. And it's pretty lazy and bad, because it's just, the analogy is just taken to such an extreme of segregation that it just becomes kind of a really absurdist fantasy on the part of Jordan Peele. What else? The thing I don't understand, really, is this movie, like, this movie, is it bad? It's acted really well. The choreography's great. The music's good. For the first half, it's okay. It's a legitimately interesting idea. I was always in suspense while watching it. But the trouble is, the plot makes no sense, and the analogy is stupid and obvious. And Jordan Peele, if you're watching this, you're just not as deep as you think you are. So, I'd kind of suggest you just go back to doing comedy stuff with Key, because you're just not that good at being very deep. And what really saddens me is people who think that Jordan Peele is deep, because he's not. Because all his movies are just, don't be a racist. And I'm not a racist, so I'd prefer to just watch a good old-fashioned horror movie where you're not supposed to sympathize with the killers. And you just think, oh, Norman Bates, he's crazy. That's one reason Norman Bates is way better. Because he's just crazy, and you're not supposed to feel sorry for him. Maybe a tiny bit, but nothing like the scissor killers in Us. And the other thing is, as the clone in the basement explains, they are human, they just don't have souls. So presumably, if the switcheroo between her and the real one took place at about when they were like 5, then sure, they could adapt. So again, the twist, it doesn't really mean anything. I assume it's supposed to say, oh, look, the scissor people are just like us, and I'm one of them. But the fact is, she's not one of the scissor people. She stopped being a clone when she was 5, and from there on, she assimilated it to normal human culture, and whatever. I don't know how no one's noticed that there are 300 million clones in the sewer, because supposedly there's one for every American. I have no idea how the mad scientists got a gene sample from every American alive, how the genes matched up in every single case with the children, and I overall I just don't get really any of it, because it makes no sense. And you think it's going to be a horror movie about this isolated family in the cabin, but they're only like 10 miles from the nearest town. And instead of Jordan Peele just using classic, your cell phone doesn't work or you forgot your cell phone, it's the entire world is being invaded by the sewer scissor people, and they're able to combat the humans with their scissors. And it's like, oh, it's because they're them that they know how to fight, you. But the trouble is, the movie should be called Them, not Us, because they're not the people. They're just clones that have been fed on nothing but rabbit meat and unfiltered water. I mean, I don't know how none of them ever die down there, or why none of them have ever died. Like, you'd think there'd be like 3/4 of them would be dead, because you just can't live on that stuff for that long. Overall, I don't know. I don't know if the life of someone in poverty is as bad as living in a sewer, and I think Jordan Peele is really disrespectful for capitalizing on the suffering of minorities with a dumb horror movie about people living in the sewer. And above all, I just think the real trouble with us is it can't decide if it wants to be fun, just fun escapist horror, or if it just wants to be a serious movie. But it really fails at both, and it's not good. And above all, I think audiences should expect more from Jordan Peele. The one thing I will commend us for is, well, I thought it would be more like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where like the clones could pretend to be them, or like they could invade their bodies. But it's not like that, because the clones are all like really mentally handicapped, and they can't even have human speech, or they can't, and they don't even know how to move right. And how the hell can they break someone's kneecap or lay a gasoline trap? It's like, how do you even know gasoline lights on fire? There's just so many questions that are left unanswered, and it's because Jordan Peele is a bad director, bad writer, whatever. I don't know if he wrote this. Maybe he didn't, because Hollywood people, they have like 2,000 people working on the same movie, which is pretty ludicrous, because I can make movies with just me and they're alright. Above all, though, I praise it for its original plot. It's not a rip-off that just kind of adds in a catchy premise like the first episode of Twilight Zone. See my review on that. But then again, it's not a very good original idea. I mean, if you went to a drive-in movie in the 60s, this would be a B movie. It wouldn't win an Oscar, but these days everything has to win an Oscar, because only 8 movies come out per year, so and Hollywood is so limited in the amount of ideas it's willing to let loose, because in the modern age of the internet, anyone can come up with a movie, and it's assumed that all the low-budget ones are bad and all the high-budget ones must be good. Overall, Jordan Peele's Us is just like its predecessor, Get Out. And what I'd advise Jordan Peele to do is cut with the racist stuff and just give us a good old horror movie. Like how in Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero hired one of the first black horror actors of all time, not because he was black, but just because he was a good actor. And the film never brings up the fact that he's black. It's just like, oh, he's gonna shoot some zombies. And in the end, he gets shot by a cop, but not because he's black, but because the cop thinks he's a zombie. That's what I think a lot of horror needs to be. Just fun, interesting, and scary fun. And overall, Jordan Peele's Us is a bad horror that can't decide if it also wants to be a sci-fi, and it's not scary, or funny, or really anything. I look forward to the Twilight Zone reboot, because Jordan Peele can kind of be more funny there. I suggest he doesn't rip off any more Night Gallery episodes. I know you're doing that, Jordan, so you can cut that. But above all, it wasn't that good. If you want to see a movie about a family, watch Hereditary. I know it's pretty mainstream and not as independent as it pretends it is, but it's still a much better horror movie. Back to basics. Real scary like The Shining. And if you want to see a really neat movie about red things all over the California hills, then watch The Invitation. It has a legitimately unsettling claustrophobic atmosphere, and it's a real indie film. And once you watch it, you'll be like, oh wow, this is so much better than Jordan Peele's Us. I sure wish I had seen it back in 2015 when it came out, but I was too busy watching Get Out with Jordan Peele. But yeah, watch The Invitation. It's about this guy, and he's invited to this party by his ex-wife. I won't give away spoilers for that, because the ending's great. And it's just a great, well-made film, but no one watches that, because they're all out watching Us. The new brilliant Jordan Peele "Don't Be a Racist to the Sewer Scissor People" movie. Above all, it's just not a very good movie. I like it because it's original, but I can't say I like it because of the analogy, which is too obvious, and I don't need to know it because I'm not a racist, and above all, I don't know. It's just not a very good movie. It's not scary. What's really sad is the acting's good, all the shots are good, and it's an interesting idea. It's just not good. I wish Hollywood would come up with something better. I thought this might be, kinda good, but as it turns out, it's just not. I think Hollywood is officially dead. One more thing before we go. I know I have some fans out there. Stop pretending to be me on Rational Wiki and Reddit. I'm getting very tired of that. And if it's you, Earl, I know it's you, so cut it out, okay? Alright, I've been Nicholas Rusticator. This has been a review on Us. Not Us as in me and you watching this, but a review on Us, the new big budget bad Jordan Peele movie. That I don't like Jordan Peele that much. Okay, see ya in the next one. Alright, this is the end of the review. Like and sub.